From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
Welcome to this special edition of Newsmakers, a debate between the candidates for state representative for District 15 in Cranston. Hello, everybody. I'm Tim White.
And I'm Ted Nisi. This is a significant race that could shape not just what happens in one legislative district in Cranston, but for the entire state.
Now, this debate is taking place in our 12 News studios. The candidates and moderators are all more than 6 feet apart. And the candidates are the incumbent Democrat Nicholas Mattiello and Republican candidate Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung.
Mr. Mattiello was elected as a state representative in 2006 and has been Rhode Island's Speaker of the House for the last 6 years. This is Ms. Fenton-Fung's first run for elected office. She was previously elected as a delegate for the Republican National Convention and is currently the First Lady of Cranston.
Now, each candidate will have an opportunity to give a 1-minute closing statement at the end of the debate. Mr. Mattiello, Ms. Fenton-Fung, as you know, there is no strict format. We're looking for an open and honest discussion of the issues, but if you're not answering the question or taking too long, Ted and I will jump in. Let's begin. Mr. Mattiello, I want to start with a topic we have discussed at length before, but it is back in the headlines because of the criminal trial of your former campaign aide, Jeff Britt. 4 years ago in this studio, you told us that you had no knowledge of the controversial Shauna Lawton mailer, and you told us your staff denied knowing anything about it. Yet, under oath, earlier this month, you testified the first thing you did when you learned of the mailer back then was pick up the phone and scream at your Chief of Staff, Leo Skenyon, because you were angry about it. Why would you be angry at one of your staffers if you didn't think anyone from your campaign had anything to do with it?
Well, that was very accurate as I said it then. Nobody came forward and knew anything about it. Leo Skenyon's my sounding board. If something goes good, I call him up. If something's negative, I call him up. I didn't like the mailer as I've indicated and testified, but I had no knowledge that anyone had anything to do with it. I just called them up and used them as a sounding board. And I don't remember 4 years ago. I might have assumed someone knew something about it.
Mr. Mattiello, I'm sorry, but at trial you testified that you said you thought it was a bad look, and that suggests that there was knowledge, and you knew that there was knowledge within your campaign.
No, Tim, absolutely not. It was, I saw the mailer, and I didn't like it. Shauna Lawton was putting out something for me. I didn't like it, and I maybe assumed, it was 4 years ago. I can't tell you exactly what I was thinking then, but I had not talked to anybody about it, didn't know anything about it. Clearly, Tim, if I knew, I would have stopped it before I got upset with this. Okay, so I was upset because I didn't know about it. I saw it, maybe made some assumptions, and used Leo Skenyon as my sounding board.
Look, again, back in 2016, Mr. Mattiello, you told us you asked your staff, they denied any knowledge, so they lied to you.
No, they didn't. I still don't believe Leo Skenyon knew anything about it. Matt Jerzik didn't know anything about it.
Matt Jerzik absolutely knew something about it. We know that now from the trial.
I didn't see his testimony. I believe he assisted in compartmentalized things and didn't really know what Jeff Britt was up to. That's my belief right now. Look, this was looked at by the Board of Elections, by the Attorney General's Department. We had a full trial. There's one thing that's clear, Tim. You know, forget everybody else, and I don't think they knew about it. But the one thing that's clear is I did not know anything about it.
All right, and Ms. Fenton-Fung, I have a question for you about this topic, but first, you have made this central to your campaign, so I want you to react to his answer.
I want to take it apart in two specs right there. One, I don't know how many times you practiced that line in front of the mirror, but you might be able to convince yourself of that after thinking of it too long, but guess what? You're not fooling anybody in District 15. You absolutely knew. During the trial it came out, you signed every check. You approve every mailer. And let's talk about Leo, who we're now calling a sounding board. During the trial it came out, and he admitted that he was the de facto campaign manager for you. He is the taxpayer-funded campaign manager. He makes $191,000 a year. Okay, Frank Montanaro, again, central to your campaign as it came out in the trial, $167,000 a year by the taxpayers. And it continues to this day. For whatever reason, the $55,000 a year assistant clerk to House Finance is asking for my voter records in the middle of a workday. Stop using taxpayer-funded positions for your campaign.
Mr. Mattiello.
Look, I have a phenomenal staff. We do great work. We restored the council chambers. Mr. Montanaro did a great job on that. I'm getting an award in November from the Historical Society and associated groups. I have a great chief of staff. All of the things we've done, campaign finance reform, lobbying reform, putting the General Assembly back under the jurisdiction of the Ethics Commission, putting our financial disclosures online. It's all because of me working with my colleagues and my staff. We don't hold all-night sessions anymore. Those are all reforms that I've done. So my staff works extraordinarily hard. They get paid, and they should be compensated well because they do a great job. And then they could do whatever they want on their free time. I think
it's the middle of the workday. He's requesting my voter record in the middle of the workday.
I think my opponent's getting a little excited and ahead of herself. People can do what they want in their free time.
And sure, but not during a workday. And
unless
Leo Skenyon himself called himself the de facto campaign manager. Rectify that with the voters and taxpayers of District 15.
He probably was. What's that got to do with anything? I mean, Leo's my sounding board. He's like my right arm. We talk a lot and we communicate about a lot of things, and we're friends.
I do want to get to a question for you, Ms. Fenton-Fung. You have made this issue, as I said, central to your campaign. You have questioned Mr. Mattiello's character throughout your campaign, yet when it comes to President Trump, it seems you're willing to look the other way. There's the infamous Access Hollywood tape, his affair with a porn star, his charity had to shut down for misusing funds, numerous numerous aides and advisors have been indicted or imprisoned. You yourself have described some of the things that the president has said as, quote, disgusting, yet you're still voting for him. Why should people think you care so much about the character in a politician when it's not a deal breaker for you with Trump?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, too, because President Trump has said things that make my toes curl, okay? And what he said before is absolutely disgusting, okay? And no one's going to apologize for that. He is a deeply flawed candidate. The other candidate, Mr. Biden, gave the eulogy at a former Klan member's funeral, okay? Mother Teresa is not on the ballot this year, all right? I've taken a look. I know that with Mr. Biden, we're going to get higher taxes, things like defunding the police, and scenes that look like Portland and Kenosha, and that's not my vision of America. And so for those reasons and the fact that under President Trump, up until the COVID crisis, we had an economy that was lifting everybody up from every race and creed and different economic status. And so I take a look at what we need to do in the next 5 years and where are we going to bring, where's the vision for the future? And I think President Trump can bring our economy back, and that lifts everybody.
Well, Mr. Mattiello argues the same. He argues that his policies, well, he wants to continue to cut taxes, so on and so forth, but yet it is his character that you're putting front and center. You're ignoring it with the presidential campaign.
It's his character and his team's record of corruption, okay? There's very rarely an ethical, innocent human being surrounded by a bunch of people who have been convicted of things like perjury. You know what, the thing about Mr. Mattiello—
Can't we say the same about many members of the Trump administration?
And I believe they've been addressed and either removed. President Trump likes to fire people. Mr. Mattiello does not fire people, okay? When Frank Montanaro got caught with a tuition scandal, did he remove him? No, he kept him on board.
There was no scandal.
Britt, please let me finish.
No scandal.
When Mr. Britt got caught surveilling a young family with young children, what does he do? He didn't fire him. He gave him a bonus. He tried to rehire him the next cycle around.
He didn't get caught. I learned about it a week or two ago, so obviously I wasn't in a position to fire him.
You were given a binder from
Mr.
Britt that came out in the trial. I know you might not recall this now.
Not regarding
Let him
that.
answer the question. Go ahead. I'll give you 30 seconds to respond, and we're going to move on.
Not regarding that. At the end of the day, communities send representatives up there, and I think it's incumbent upon the speaker to work with everybody, and we do. If someone does something wrong, maybe shame on the community, although they didn't know. Like, some of us don't know what people are going to do. We don't know that they're going to commit perjury into the future. My opponent would like to blame me for that. My record is of reform. She goes too far in her accusations. My record is making government better, cutting taxes. We just learned that we went from 39 to 37 in the Tax Foundation rankings. We used to be at 50. We are doing phenomenal work. Our character and our work product at the Assembly is second to none, the most honest and best in the last 50 years. This is just politics. And I'll tell you later what independent people are saying about our work.
We have to move on. We're going to go to a question from Ted.
I will go to you, Ms. Fenton-Fung, on this. And the argument that some Republicans have made, and I've heard it in multiple campaigns for Mr. Mattiello, is that he's the most conservative-minded or moderate speaker that the House Democratic Caucus would elect. Former State Rep Bobby Nardolillo says in a new campaign mailer for him, quote, "Nick Mattiello is our state's only firewall against a far-left progressive movement that keeps growing stronger." What do you say to a conservative-leaning voter in District 15 who worries casting a ballot for you will indirectly empower progressives they don't agree with up at the State House?
Well, thanks for that question, because it does come up when we talk about it at the doors all the time. I will point the voter to Mr. Mattiello's interview just last week with Rhode Island Public Radio, where he, quote, said, "I've never said I'm a firewall against progressive ideas. And in fact, quote, progressive ideas are great at moving us forward, and we've passed a lot of progressive bills this past session," okay? So if he's so chummy with the progressives now in admitting he's not the firewall, where are we looking at? Where is he holding back? He already betrayed the pro-life community, who went balls to the wall for him last election and won him that last election against Steve Frias. Steve Frias was a pro-life candidate. They chose Mr. Mattiello because he was supposed to be the firewall, and then as soon as that last vote was counted, he abandoned that and let the RHCA pass right on through.
Well, before I bring in Mr. Mattiello, I'll point you to the example of guns. Mr. Mattiello, I believe, has an A+ rating from the NRA, and that is an important issue for many conservative-minded voters as well. So, you know, he's argued to me in interviews before he has to balance the progressives in his caucus, but he does hold some things back. And, you know, why isn't that something that a District 15 voter says, he may not be perfect, he is a Democrat, but he's less progressive than what we might get instead? So,
well, I would point you one, Representative Chippendale came out and endorsed me this week, and he's widely respected in the 2A community. I would also take a look at our differences on firearms are rather simple in the sense that, look, in the NRA survey, I did not agree with repealing the 7-day waiting period. I did not agree with repealing the blue card, which for people who aren't familiar with, the blue card is a little safety card, a 15-minute test so you know basic firearm safety skills before you are allowed to have a firearm. I didn't see I didn't agree with repealing those at this point, so that leaves our differences with the NRA. But the next speaker is likely to be Shekarchi, who has been his number 2. If he's saying that his number 2 is so liberal and so progressive, then that I would question where he's making his leadership team. He has added other progressives to his leadership team this year. You've got Evan Shanley as Deputy Majority Leader, Chris Blazewski as Deputy Majority Whip, and now the Chair of Small Business is a progressive in Deborah Geary. So as far as trying to be a firewall, it's not wrong.
She is not a chair.
Let me turn to you on this, Mr. Mattiello, and I do want to ask you about the abortion bill because you know pro-life voters may feel you had the right to life endorsement multiple times. You've described yourself as pro-life, and then after the last election, you allowed that bill. You did vote against it, but you allowed it to pass the House, and you're now being labeled anti-life by Rhode Island Right to Life, and they're backing Ms. Fenton-Fung. What do you say to anti-abortion voters in District 15 who feel you betrayed them?
Well, what I would say, I'd say the same thing to both sides. I'm a pro-life voter, but you know nobody wants the Speaker of the House to be a dictator on any issue. So when an issue has strong, deep support amongst 2/3 of the voters and 2/3 of the House of Representatives and 2/3 of the Senate, it's just going to get a vote. And if that vote didn't go, if that bill didn't go to the floor, a bill with late-term abortion would have been discharged out and gone to the floor. So the pro-life movement should be very happy that a Roe v. Wade bill went to the floor that was well-balanced and well-thought out versus a late-term abortion, a very harsh, bad bill. But it's the will of the people. The Speaker of the House serves the will of the people.
So why won't you let the line item veto come to a vote?
The line item veto is different. People talk about, may I answer?
Go ahead.
People talk about line item veto, but when you talk to them at the door, there's no passion, and just about everyone says, oh, you're right, I didn't realize that. There is not deep-rooted support for any line item veto. In fact, when people learn and educate themselves on it, they don't want it.
But I do want to go back to
the abortion issue, very strong. I don't agree with it, But the Speaker of the House and every representative is subject to democracy and democratic rule and the will of the people.
With respect, Mr. Mattiello, though, the speakers have enormous influence over what bills get committee hearings, what bills get to the floor. And in that case, you made a different decision. And your campaigns have said to these voters in District 15, elect the Speaker of the House. You'll have enormous influence of there. And they trusted you to block anti-abortion bills.
And that's all true, Ted. They do have enormous influence and power that they wouldn't otherwise have, but it's not indefinite. It can be overcome. When that strong a majority in a democratic system wants it, it's going to happen. There comes a breaking point that you can't hold it back. And being Speaker is a very, very, very difficult job. First of all, if I ever lost this election, you don't know who the next Speaker is going to be. It puts everybody in turmoil. You make no assumptions. If I win the election, things become much more predictable. The power of the speakership, the influence. I'm the first Speaker in the city of Cranston's history. Why would Cranston ever want to lose that influence? Mayor Fung used to come to me and say, Speaker, pilot money, distressed community money.
We are flying through time, so I'm going to give you each 30 seconds on this, and then 30 to you, and then we'll go to Tim.
Yeah, so as far as, that was a lot to unpack there, but the influence of the Speaker, where has he been as far as the sex offenders at Harrington Hall? Instead of putting in money to fix up school buildings, he put in money to fix up Harrington Hall for the sex offenders, which we now have 50 registered sex offenders living at Harrington Hall, well above the handshake agreement that happened years ago. He hasn't delivered on a budget this year. As I go door to door, people ask me, where has the General Assembly been? He has been asleep. People who work in grocery stores, teachers, hospital workers, we have been at work every single day during this pandemic. And despite putting in $200,000 of plexiglass up on Smith Hill, they refuse to meet. We are one of only 2 states that is nowhere on the budget. And he's saying, I'm just going to punt till after the election. It's because he can't get his promises through. It's because he has not delivered on car tax relief. And he can't. That's why he's punting it till after the election. If he could have, he would have done it already and taken credit for it.
30 seconds, then we have to go to Tim, Mr. Mattiello.
That's interesting, because I assure people we'll phase out their car tax as we promised. We're in the 4th or the 6th year. My opponent has suggested we haven't done a budget because we can't. She's wrong. And then she sent out a mailer saying, don't worry about it, folks. I'm going to get the car tax relief done for you. The Senate President and the Governor want it, so it's going to happen. You can't have it both ways. The only way the car tax relief happens is if I'm elected. If I'm elected, it will in fact happen. We are acting prudently with the budget. Every New England state is in the same exact situation, and most states in the country are in the same situation.
And we might come back to that topic, but we have just like 7 minutes before we have to get to your closing statement. So I want to do a rapid fire section. You're both familiar with this. I want to get through some topics quickly. 1 or 2 word answers here. Mr. Mattiello, we'll start with you. Do you support or oppose the proposed Costco development in Cranston?
Oppose.
And Ms. Fenton-Fung?
I oppose it where they're talking about it at Mulligan's Island. I would be open to it at other locations.
That's what the question's about. Okay, here. Stay with you, Ms. Fenton-Fung. Only 2 communities, Providence and Newport, have police body-worn cameras. Do you support or oppose the Cranston Police Department having body-worn cameras?
Yes, and they're doing a pilot program.
You support it?
I would support that.
All right, Mr. Mattiello, A through F, letter grade for Governor Gina Raimondo's handling of the coronavirus pandemic.
A.
Okay, Ms. Fenton-Fung?
A B and an F for the General Assembly.
Do you support, Ms. Fenton-Fung, or oppose legalized recreational marijuana?
I'm open to it. SAMHSA puts out a big study. I don't think we need to repeat the mistakes of the first few states that have gone before us. They're saying high property
You're
crimes.
You're open to it, Mr. Mattiello?
Maybe.
Do you support or oppose question 1 on the ballot, Mr. Mattiello, which would remove the phrase "and Providence Plantations" from the state's official name?
Support.
And Ms. Fenton-Fung?
I support, and I'm glad it's on the ballot.
A majority of House and Senate members co-sponsored a bill banning high-capacity magazines in Rhode Island. Ms. Fenton-Fung, would you support or oppose that bill?
Oppose it.
And Mr. Mattiello?
Oppose.
All right, we're taping this debate Friday morning. On Thursday, the state reported nearly 400 new coronavirus cases for the first time since the spring lockdown that we've hit that level, and the new numbers will come out within hours. Tim and I are both hearing from more and more teachers and parents who are alarmed about schools holding classes in person as cases rise, but there are certainly others who feel it's important to keep children in school. I'll start with you on this one, Ms. Fenton-Fung. Simple question, is it time with rising cases to close Rhode Island schools for in-person learning, or do you support keeping them open right now?
Right now, I support keeping them open with a close eye. I think the Department of Ed and the schools are working well together at this point. I hear from teachers every day on the trail, and it just, first off, I want to thank every teacher out there. I show up at so many of your houses, and you're handling classrooms that are half online and half in person, and they're doing yeoman's work with a very low safety net, and it's difficult for them, and thank you for all the work that they're doing. When we take a look, there's a balance of outbreaks at times. The first few weeks, there were actually more cases in people who were being homeschooled than in person learning, so I think we just have to balance that over time. We predicted a second wave is coming, and I think we're going to play with it over the next few weeks.
Mr. Mattiello, I'm sure you hear from constituents who are concerned about this, parents, teachers. What is your thought right now on whether it's appropriate to keep schools open?
Yes, actually my wife's a teacher's assistant in kindergarten, and I know the difficulty that the teacher that she works with goes through. It's very hard, it's very distressing on teachers, it's hard on children. Coronavirus is a difficult situation. Nobody created it. Unfortunately, we all have to live with it and deal with it and protect ourselves and our families. However, I lean towards being as safe as possible, and I thank the governor for great planning, and I thank everyone at the Department of Ed and all of our teachers for the great work we're doing, but I lean very strongly towards having children go back to school, because I think there's a lot of consequences to too much isolation. So I think you have to pick the best balance, but it's certainly under no circumstances perfect. There is no perfect answer to any of this. We do the best we can. Some of us are more judgmental than others, but I think the governor is doing a great job. I don't agree with every decision the governor makes, by the way.
That's for sure.
But she's doing a great job, and you have to give credit. And I thank her for that strong voice. And I've been very supportive of the government responding with one central, strong voice during these times.
All right, just quickly, I want to dovetail off of Ted's question on this topic. Mr. Mattiello, with you, if a parent refuses to let their child get immunized for the coronavirus, if and when a vaccine comes out, should the child be refused access to the school?
I leave that to the health experts. If it poses a risk to other children, then yes. But if not, then no, and people should have their own rights. And in most cases, it won't pose any risk because of herd immunity and so forth. But I always leave those decisions regarding health care to the experts. I take their advice, and if we need any legislation passed, we do it subject to the advice of experts.
Ms. Fenton-Fung, where do you fall on that briefly?
Yeah, really quickly, I think that every family has to make the decision from themselves, and I as a healthcare worker, I have to get immunized all the time, and I understand that so as not to infect others. But when we're talking about children, I think every parent should make that decision for their own. If it makes more sense for the child to stay home through distance learning, then that should be their right.
I want to spend just 45 seconds with each of you on a topic that, Providence police is embroiled, excuse me, the city of Providence is embroiled in riots and protests right now, and police reform is once again in the spotlight. Ms. Fenton-Fung, your opponent co-sponsored a bill that would reform the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights, including the ability for a police chief to discipline an officer longer without triggering a hearing. Again, 45 seconds. Would you support or oppose that bill if you were elected?
I don't know the exact specifics of that bill. It really wasn't fleshed out that much this year. I always think reforms are good, but just getting rid of protections one way or the other, that's not the extreme go.
How about the aspect of allowing a police chief to discipline an officer up to 30 days without triggering a hearing?
Yeah, it's one of those things, too, that we're so lucky in Cranston with having Colonel Winquist that the procedures move along well. I think that
your city has seen some Leobor cases.
Over the years, for sure, and I think we've reformed, and that's the key. When you're reforming a police department, you bring in a different type of command set and a different type of channel. So,
and Mr. Mattiello, you've garnered the support of all the police unions in the state. Will you push this bill forward if they oppose it?
That bill is a starting point. It's a very pro-management bill. I've learned afterwards when I started studying it a little bit. I signed it and co-sponsored it with the intention of looking at the issue and having a real debate on it. So I'm not sure I support it as it's written there. You're correct.
So are you getting cold feet on a bill you co-sponsored?
Oh, no. It's designed to start a discussion. And we will take a look at it, and we have a hearing process. It goes through the hearing process, and we determine what's best after that process. I am very proud of the support. I've gotten from all the police unions, corrections, and so forth, and I'm a strong supporter of the police and the proper management of the police departments.
All right, believe it or not, it's time for closing remarks. Each candidate gets an opportunity for a 1-minute closing remark, the order of which was drawn randomly prior to this debate. Ms. Fenton-Fung, you're up first. Your 60-second closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Well, District 15, new blood is good, and new ways of thinking of problems are even better. For if the current ways were really working, then we wouldn't constantly be 50th in the nation for business per CNBC, have the 4th highest unemployment in the nation in the most east of the Rockies, or see headlines of a $900 million budget hole. The insiders who make their livings on Smith Hill are doing just fine, but so many of you watching in living rooms today are not. Mattiello's General Assembly has increased the gas tax, has increased fees at the DMV, and has expanded the sales tax to include more everyday items. Yet, no matter how much more the state takes in, we're not seeing the returns when we're talking about infrastructure, school buildings, or relief for our small businesses. Taking on the establishment has always been in my blood. You could ask my parents that. And the fight has never been more important than right now. The fight for stronger and safer school buildings, the fight for health care reforms like lowering the price of prescription drugs and combating the opioid epidemic.
Ms. Fenton-Fung, I have to wrap you up. I'm sorry, your 1 minute is up. Mr. Mattiello, your 60-second closing remarks.
Thank you both. It's been an honor to serve as the representative from District 15 and the Speaker of the House. From that position, I've worked hard at improving the lives of our citizens. We've invested heavily in education, job training programs, career tech. We've lowered taxes, about 10 taxes. I recently learned, I think Wednesday, that we've gone from 39 to 37 in the Tax Foundation's rankings, where we used to be at 50. So we're not perfect. My opponent is correct. We're certainly not perfect, but we're moving along and we're much more competitive than ever. We're creating an environment that's conducive to job growth. That's why the Rhode Island manufacturers, the CPAs, the Chambers of Commerce, the liquor industry, the Rhode Island builders, amongst many, many others, are all supporting my candidacy. They've worked with me. They know the impact that I have on education, job creation, the economy, and people want to move it along. Thank you. I respectfully request your support.
All right, Mr. Mattiello and Ms. Fenton-Fung, I want to thank you both for joining us for this debate. And don't forget, 12 News is your local election headquarters. November 3rd is Election Day, and we have one more debate left in this debate series.
That's right, our final debate next week. This is the debate for Massachusetts' 4th Congressional District, where Joe Kennedy is retiring after his failed bid for U.S. Senate. We will have Democratic nominee Jake Auchincloss and Republican nominee Julie Hall here in studio to debate for that seat, which includes a portion of Fall River, Attleboro, and Taunton. So you'll want to tune in next week.
And we've had already the Warwick mayoral and Cranston mayoral debates. If you missed any of them, they are on WPRI.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for Newsmakers so you can take these debates with you on the road, I suppose, if you really want to learn more about the candidates. Again, I want to thank both of our candidates for joining us for this debate, and we'll see you next week here on Newsmakers.